Earlier this week, of course, Wednesday afternoon, the Royal Commission of Inquiry into Abuse in Care, both in state-based care and in faith-based care, was presented to Parliament. An extensive report which took many years to put together, which looked at abuse in those settings between 1950 and 1999. Hundreds of recommendations, thousands of pages. But what do we make of this? Shocked and appalled, of course, is an appropriate response. But what do we in particular as a church community make of this? That this happened within places that should be the safest places in the world for children. How do we respond to a community that is perhaps quite rightly angry and wanting something done about this awful business? Well, joining me on the program now is Catholic theologian and academic Dr. Rocío Figueroa. Kia ora, thank you so much for your time today.
Kia ora, good morning. Nice to be here.
Firstly, as I mentioned, you are an academic and also involved in research, but for you, there's also a personal aspect to this particular topic. It is part of your story as well, if you don't mind sharing your own personal experience.
Yes, so I am a Catholic and I am Peruvian, and I was abused when I was 15 years old in a Catholic context by a religious man. And of course I blocked it. I couldn't label it. I was really very young.
Yeah.
And then I became a sister, a nun, a religious sister. And it was just after 40 years, when I was 45, I realized what happened to me.
Yeah.
And I investigated the community. Now they have recognized 64s. I was a whistleblower who denounced everything. And that's why from that point, I became an activist and a researcher using my theological studies for that. I left the community.
This is as you mentioned, this is an area of research for you as well. A little bit on that, perhaps. What type of research are you involved with, Rocío?
Yes, well, so I began interviewing, doing qualitative studies with victims of abuse within the church. I began with male survivors, but then I realized also that we needed a voice of women. So, and actually now I am working on a research with women religious who have been and continue being abused in the Catholic settings, in Catholic religious communities.
In some ways, your research not dissimilar to some of the processes involved with the Royal Commission. However, of course, a broader scope to the Royal Commission's findings. But I imagine, yes, we are shocked and appalled, but for you, not many surprises with the report's findings. This lines up to your own experience and what you're finding out from your research?
Look, it is always, when you do the research, it always surprises you, it always shocks you, it always touches you. Is something because the stories are so horrible. And of course, the New Zealand report has its particularities because all the colonization and the abuse that have been against Maori, Pacifica people, disabled. So it has particularly characteristics. It has been a really sad day, begin reading it. I am just reading it now. Of course, I began reading recommendations and the parts addressed to the faith communities. And I am not surprised, but always shocked and really touched about it.
Looking at the recommendations, and there's hundreds of them, some relatively simple, and the government has indicated that they will be implemented immediately, and some of them have already, I understand. Others more complicated, but from your perspective, the recommendations, if for the most part taken on board, will it make a difference?
Oh, of course, they will make a difference. First of all, that one of the recommendations has been apologies, official apologies. That's a very important for the path of healing of survivors. A second recommendation has been also the fact of have supervisors for all ministries. For example, in the Catholic Church, we don't have supervisors for priests or people who are in charge of ministries. So I think it will be a difference if you have someone in which you have to be accountable. So I think it would be a big difference. So yeah, there are recommendations also of review all the public honors, because also it's very traumatic for victims when they go to a place and a street is named from a street name, an honor in a hall.
Yeah.
So if we take out all those public honors, it will be very important for victims. And of course, the redress, it has to be, it has already begun, the compensations, but we need to continue for all those who have not received the compensation and that or not, it has not been just or enough for them. So yes, there is a lot of things that will change if we follow, but we need to follow the recommendations. I think they are all very important and necessary to follow them.
Now, putting this in context, you're not speaking on behalf of the Catholic Church, but you are speaking as a Catholic theologian.
Yes.
And from the perspective
Yes.
of your research. But from that perspective, how would you like the Catholic Church? How do you feel the Catholic Church in New Zealand should respond to the report and its recommendations?
Well, I would say follow the recommendations. First of all the Catholic Church, we need to read, to study the report, and to say, okay, first of all, follow the recommendations because they are very practical, and we also need to know also what the state, if the state, the government will create these agencies. Just in that way, we will be able to also enter into that scheme. But at the same time, I hope that the Church will follow the different recommendations, for example, about the compensation, about the redress, about the apologies, about the review of public honors, about the formation of safeguarding and prevention. We have been criticized also in the report a lot regarding the systemic issues. Yes. I think, and they have criticized the fact that the Catholic Church has not done anything regarding the systemic issues. Yeah. And really, I think if we want to really solve the problem and this not happen again, we need to change the many systemic factors.
Just wanting to pick up on that, actually, because to be fair, this type of issue has plagued the Catholic Church over many years. And in this report, again, disproportionately, sexual abuse of children has happened within a Catholic setting. Now, some people would say that is because the Catholic Church is so deeply involved in the care of children. It's involved in more programs, it's involved in more education and residential care for children. Is there something about the Catholic system, though, or perhaps the lack of protections within that system, that needs to be changed at a fundamental level, in your view?
I would say yes. One of the problems, I think, is the lack of transparency, and also the fact, I think we need also to be more accountable. I think it has the hierarchical way of organizing the church in which the leaders are not accountable has to change. So I think that's one element that it's fundamental. That's why I think that having supervisors is important. And having supervisors of all the leaders. I think also one problem has been clericalism. Yeah. So the idealization of the priest, the putting the priest on a high level above the normal believers. Yeah. I think it's a big problem. So yeah, lots of cultural elements have to change.
One of the additional tragedies, and certainly taking nothing away from the awful tragedy of the abuse that's occurred, but an additional tragedy to this is that this will perhaps reinforce some prejudices that people have against faith, the Catholic Church, but also faith in general. This will perhaps reinforce some stereotypes about what it means to be a person of faith, which of course is not fair and is not true. But how do we respond to this as a Christian community beyond the Catholic Church, as a faith community generally? How do we respond to that?
Well, I think we have to embrace it. We deserve it as communities. We have failed it has been the betrayal of the institutions, and not just the Catholics, but all the faith community institutions. So yeah, we will perhaps, of course, I think we have already been losing lots of members that they do not trust anymore. So we have to gain again their trust. And for me, the only way is not in putting us in a position of a defensive position, because they are right to not trust us. So what we have to is gain again their trust. What? Doing the right things to do, following the recommendations, showing that we are changing and we want to change and we will implement the changes. The only way in which you gain the trust of someone is with your acts and behaviors and policies and transformation. And we need to change. And it will be a time for purification, I would say. And we are in that time. Many people are leaving the churches because of that. And is the right, and we cannot control that. It's consequence, and we have to embrace also the consequence. We as communities, we are responsible of that. We have created that, so we have to embrace that and purify. It can be a moment of purification of our communities.
This is an historical report. It looks at a particular period of time, quite a lengthy period in some ways, but these were things that happened back in the day. Do you feel that things are better than they were? No doubt there is still abuse happening within churches, but are we learning? Are there better safeguards in place today than there were perhaps a decade ago?
I think it's changing. I have to say, from my view of what I'm seeing, for example, within the Catholic Church, things are changing. Now we have processes. There is more consciousness. There is more education also. We are educating for example, here in the Theological College, we are educating our students for safeguarding. Now, for example, if there is an abuse, it is denounced, a priest is dismissed. If it's a minor, for example, yes. So, but sometimes the change have been too slow. I think we can do better. There's a lot of space to do, but I think we are in the right track. Yes, I do.
Certainly, this report shows that there is more work to be done in this space. Thank you for the work that you're doing, both in academic and in research areas. Thank you for telling this story and pushing this narrative forward. So important at this time. Very much appreciate what you do, and thanks so much for your time today.
You're welcome. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.